Alright, good morning everybody. So we are in week 8, which is amazing. We have, I think, like 17 meetings left in the quarter, and that's it. So 4 weeks minus Thanksgiving. It's week 8, but there's 4 weeks left, but we kind of missed most of 1 week because of Thanksgiving. So, and also this Wednesday is a holiday, so there's no classes this Wednesday either. So we actually don't have that many classes left, which is kind of shocking. But we're in really good shape. We're pretty much right on the schedule that I had imagined in the beginning of this. All right, so let's start with any questions. Either on what we've been doing or on homework 7, dialogue, etc. All right, well, oh, there we go. Is there a way to use awk or grep with dialogue to select a range of dates? Sure. Let's see. What do you mean by select a range of dates? So like picking out from a file records between 2 given dates. Here's an idea. Take your date. So, what's today? Like 9th November. And break it into a year, a 2-digit month, leading zeros included, and a 2-digit day of the month. And then if you put this as, say, a first column in your records, so have that, and then whatever else you want. You can index off of this. If you sort by this, your file will be date sorted. And then how do you pick things out in between? So you could read in from your file 1 line at a time. So that's that do while read line statement we talked about last week. And if you separate by pipes, right, do your awk -f \pipe. Echo your line, pipe it into awk. Print the first field, right? And then if you throw all of that inside back quotes, you can assign that to a variable d. And if you know the 2 dates you want to search between, just do, if d is greater than or equal to starting date, and if d is less than or equal to ending date. And that should effectively sandwich your dates. You don't even need to sort your input file, actually. Just turn the date into an 8-digit integer. And as long as you keep your leading zeros in front of the month and the day, you can do regular equalities to compare dates and see if you're in between 2 date ranges. So something like that. And yeah, you can use awk to pull apart that line that you read in. Alright, how do you include all the dialogue command in a file? Dialogue is just a Unix command, so inside a bash script, if you say dialogue -- calendar, etc., right, it'll run that dialogue inside your script. And if you run it inside the back quotes and set, whatever variable equal to back quote all of that stuff, then when the dialogue exits, if it produced any output, like a date or a line of input text from the user, that'll get loaded into this variable. Just remember when you do that, you want to do your -- output -fd space 1 at the end of your command. Let's see, I have success with dialogue in command line, but not in bash. So I don't know what the particular issue might be you're having in bash, but you can, if you can describe that here, we can talk about it, or you can come by office hours, of course, and show me. But it should work more or less the same, whether you're on the command line or you're inside a script. So let's make a script. So let's get a date from the user. So I'll, if I'm remembering my arguments correctly, so we'll put a title on the calendar, we'll put a default height and width, we'll say send output to standard out, and I'll capture all that in this variable D. And then let's just echo that inside angle brackets. And I'll clear my screen before we do that because the dialog leaves some remnants behind. So when are you leaving? And I'll say I'm leaving on Wednesday. And so the date is November 11th, 20. So whatever you can do with a dialog command from a command line, you should be able to do it inside a script. It should be on the standard path, and it should function basically the same. Let's see, the command line is bash, right? Would a help function with instructions to guide the user through the calendar count as an extra feature? I'm going to say no on that. I'd like your extra feature to be something that you know, is kind of GUI-ish or related to the calendar function, as opposed to a help function. Let's see. I'll tell you what though, on the dialogues that pop up, like when you're asking the person to enter some information, if you make use of the extra button and turn that into a help button, so that they can, you know, click on that and get help for the specific thing that they're trying to do, I would be happy to count that as one of the 3 additional features. But something more than just a general help that you click and it shows you the kind of how-to for the whole thing, that wouldn't count. But if you make it targeted so that at each point of the calendar program you can get specific help on that section, yeah, that would be a good optional feature. How can we sort the file that contains all of our dates? So there is a sort command in Unix, and you can just give it the name of a file and it will sort it alphabetically. So there's all the empty lines in my bash, and then the number signs and the aliases and so on. Don't do this to a bash script, by the way. So if your file is organized in a way where, for example, you have you know, dates in some sortable format in the beginning, sort by default starts with column 1 and sorts alphabetically. Okay. So if you had your dates stored like this, sorting alphabetically is not going to work, right? Because February comes after December, right? But if you put it into a numeric form, that will work great. Sort, you can also specify, you know, particular columns to sort on. You can specify delimiters for fields. You can ask it to sort numerically. And normally if you have space 7 and 100, right? If you just sort this, the 100 will come first. If you do a sort dash n, it takes things that look like numbers and sorts them as numbers. Sorry, yeah. That's not going to affect you on this, but if you're trying to sort with numbers and it's not working, try taking a look at sort dash n. My dialog had problems in bash when I put in back quotes and wasn't assigning it to a variable, so when I removed those it worked. Interesting. Oh, if you put it in back quotes and you're not assigning to a variable, yeah, that won't work. It will probably give you an error message saying, you know, 9th November 2020, unrecognized command or something like that. So, the back quotes are very definitely right. So there's my dialog box. Well, this won't actually break it. So it takes the output of the dialog command and tries to execute that, and that's just going to be weird to it. And I freaked out my terminal. Yeah, so remember, reset is a useful command when you're playing with this stuff. If your dialog kind of, you know, goes south halfway through or something, it can leave your terminal in a weird mode. It can leave it where sometimes it won't echo while you're typing, or it can put you in strange color combinations. Reset usually gets you out of that. Worst case, just log out and log back in, and that should get you back to the initial state. Output FD. FD means file descriptor apparently, but like, what does that mean, and why does that allow dialog commands to be placed inside backticks? I don't actually know 100% if what I'm about to tell you is true, but my impression is that when you do a dialog command, so let's just run dialog and let's put it into, you know, haha. And so dialog by itself sends all of its output to standard out, right? Which is the escape codes that generate the GUI looking output. Since all of that is going into standard out, right, you can't capture that, because, you know, if you try to capture it, just like when you redirect to an output file, everything, including the graphics drawing commands, go into that output or get captured by the backquotes and stuff. So if you do output FD1, I think all of the stuff that gets used to draw the graphics gets sent to standard out. So file descriptor 2 and file descriptor 1 is reserved for the actual output from the command. Right, so if we did I don't know. Like I said, I never dug all the way into that. I don't know what exactly output FD1 is doing to let you see the graphics on your display, but then let you capture standard out. But the punchline is it's not sending all of those graphics commands to standard out anymore. It's sending them to a different output descriptor. And then you can grab standard out and it'll just be the stuff produced by the command, like the date or the user input or the file selection. If I wanted to get separate variables from a checklist, how would I do that? Well, if you do a checklist command, and I'm not sure exactly what you mean by separate variables, but if you do a checklist command, right, like this, so I can select, let's select those first two items, right? So the field here will be the output produced by this command. So if you do something like like variable equals back quote the whole checklist command, right, with the output FD at the end, then you can go through and you can make your selections. And then if you look at that variable, it will have space-separated list of each of the things that you selected. And if you wanted to break through those one at a time, you can do that with awk. You can also do a for loop on variables like this, which right. So if you have a space-separated list of words or tokens, you can loop through them with a for command. And this is a for statement that is allowed in Bash. We haven't talked about it before today. But you can say for variable in and name a space-separated list of tokens. And each time you go through the loop, this variable C in this case will take on the value of the next word from this list. So the first time through the loop, it's equal to default, and the second time through, it's equal to last, and then the loop exits. And that's one way to break up a space-separated list in a way that lets you process it inside a loop. Let's see, this is awesome. I love questions here. For deleting an appointment, could we just give the user an edit box and tell them to delete or edit the appointment they want? That's what I'm doing right now, and it seems to work fine. Well, if I understand what you're suggesting, other than the fact that that potentially lets the person monkey around with the file in ways that could break it, that would probably be fine. Yeah, I think that would be fine for deleting an appointment if you give them an edit box, because you have to capture the output of that and use it to replace the file, so that would be good. Let's see, like if the user selects more than first and default, and I want to do something with first and not default. Okay, you got it, good. Can you make an if statement that will create a directory of a changing variable? So like if I had one appointment in already and I wanted to make another one, how can you make a directory name that is created from something with a variable? So you can definitely do that. Right, so C was the name of that last choice. I can just make dir $C, and now I have a directory named last. Right, so that's totally legal. But yes, prepare for an injection attack, because what if somebody says, you know, that they want to make an appointment and the description is, you know, /bin or /etc/password, right? If you execute Unix commands with arguments supplied by a user, there's a good possibility of that being misused. For example, maybe you're making a directory, but the directory name that the person specifies is, you know, sumdir /rm-rf tilde, right? And if you were to pass this to bash, right, with a make dir in front, depending on how well behaved the system is, the command might be interpreted as let's make sumdir and then let's remove all the files from the home directory on down. So that's a injection vulnerability. And so you usually want to be a little cautious with taking something that's coming from, say, a user, right, and just throwing it to a bash shell. But you can have fun exploring that also. But yeah, mechanically, right, make dir $C, that works perfectly fine. Any Unix command, right, this will just get replaced by the value of a variable, and then that command gets executed. Let's see. And along the lines of those questions, though, I'm curious why you're making directories based on appointments. That might be a good thing to do, but it might be something that you don't need to do. So if you have a reason why you're doing that that makes sense to you, that's good. If you're doing that because it seems like the only way, let's talk about it, because there's other ways to do this without using separate directories to keep track of separate appointments and so on. You can do a lot within just a single file, or even multiple files. For the form, each line the user inputs is sent to standard error on its own line, but it only outputs the text the user entered and not the name of the field or anything like that. It's not a huge deal, and it even outputs blank lines, so you're guaranteed to have the different fields output to the same line each time. But is there some way to get dialog to output something in front of those values, essentially a key value pair? I would think so, but I haven't actually played with the form switch at all. But in the checklist, for example, right, there's these things in front, right, become like a key to go with a value. And in Zenity, which we used to use for this class, right, there's a way to hide certain fields to make them, just usable as keys. And I would guess there's something in form, because form seems to parallel a lot of Zenity's underlying mechanics. I'll take a look at that, though. I'll play with form a little more and let you know what I find. Can I make a radio list that will show each line of a file as a separate option? Sure. How would you do that? Do it by hand. Right, so what's your radio list code? Well, it's basically like a checklist, right? Your trick is to construct this part of your dialog command inside your bash script, right? So make a do loop that reads from the file that you want to display, and for each line that you read, right, put, I don't know, maybe a sequential integer, right? And then put the actual line that you read from the file, throw it inside double quotes so it's a single token, and then, on or off, depending on which one you want to have selected. Use that to build up a big long string in a variable, and then just throw that in to the end of the checklist command, and, feed it to dialog, and you'll get, your radio list with file lines. And that's a really good thing to work on, by the way, because what you want to do is kind of demystify all of this stuff. Really get down to the idea, like, whatever I put here, that's what the dialog is going to display. And I can type that in, or I can put it in a bash script, or I can generate it on the fly. Right? And generating bash commands on the fly, that's super powerful. That lets you do all kinds of interesting things that you won't find in the man page as a capability, but you can do it because you're the programmer, right? So yeah, definitely play around with that. All right, cool. Good questions, everyone. So other things. All right, so now let's play around with regular expressions. How do you force delete a directory with stuff in it? rm-rf will force delete. So here's my work directory with things in it. If I say rm-dir work, it's not going to let me do that. If I do rm-f work, it's going to say it's a directory. So if you do rm-r for recursive, that says delete this file or directory and go into all the subdirectories and delete everything from there also. and that just takes it out immediately, and it's totally gone. That's one you got to use really carefully and make sure you have good backup practices going on, because I can't tell you how many times I've done something like this, and I was in a different directory from what I thought, and I like wiped out all of my research work in this one area like just several months ago. I mean, I did it again. It happens. I'd like to sell buttons that say I did it again for every time someone does that. But yeah, rm-rf takes out the whole directory tree. All right, so regex. Man, my system is like dragging. I broke down and rebooted my machine on Saturday and ended my 6-week experiment because things are just getting too bogged down. But I seem to have lost my document camera again. So let's try this again. Yeah, Zoom is pretty resource heavy, that's for sure. And it's several versions behind, because all the cool features in Zoom, they don't seem to exist in the Linux version. Let's try this once more. That looks better. All right. Will we be doing any project? Yeah, so we are not doing a service learning project for fall quarter. I had talked about maybe introducing a version of it, but we're just going to skip that. So I'll readjust the weights for different pieces of the class accordingly at the end. For those of you who don't know, there's a thing called a service learning project. It's a year-long project that students work on in the 200 level series of courses, either the engineering or the CS sequence. And normally, you know, each quarter there's a presentation at the end of the quarter for the entire school. Everybody comes together and crowds into a tiny little room and walks around for a few hours and looks at people's projects. We stopped doing that when things started getting sketchy pandemic-wise, even before we closed down. So Izad and I talked about how to do that online, and we decided to just kind of push it back to winter quarter. And so for winter, I'll figure out some way to get people going on their projects, and then have a Zoom version of that end of quarter presentation. Because it's a good project to have in your background, to have done something of your own choosing, set it up, organize it yourself, and presented it. So we'll pick that up in winter, but for fall there's not going to be a group project or a term long project, but there is a group project. All right. Regular expressions. So we're talking first about pattern matching, and then eventually about pattern replacement. And we started to look at this last week. And you know, a pattern can be a sequence of characters, letters, digits, symbols, right? That say, you know, I'm looking for an A followed by a B followed by a C. A pattern can also be a period, which is something that matches any character, so that's a wild card. And this is different from how bash works, right? In bash, an asterisk matches any number of characters, a question mark matches one character. This is different from what bash does, okay? So these are called regular expressions. Period matches any character. Caret matches beginning of line. And a $sign matches the end of line. And this isn't the character at the beginning of the line. It's saying, you know, the pattern that you're about to see has to start from the beginning of the line. Or the pattern that you just saw has to go all the way to the end of the line. If we have, you know, something followed by a star, that means 0 or more consecutive, whatever this thing was before it. And if I say number sign star, it's going to match 0 or more number signs. If I say dot star, it's going to match 0 or more of anything. And we can also say bracket, you know, A, B, C, and that matches any of A, B, or C. And we can say bracket caret A, B, C, and that matches anything except A, B, or C. And that's kind of all we need really for playing around with this to a first order. I always pick up my bash RC file. I'm going to corrupt it one of these days. So let's say I want to look for a semicolon, right? So I can say slash semicolon and slash lets you specify a regular expression. So this will show me, you know, the next location in my file where I have a semicolon, and I'm just using the N key to show me the next occurrences of those. So there's, you know, everywhere that I have a semicolon. Right? So if I want to find a semicolon followed by a space, right, I can say slash semicolon space, and it will take me down to, you know, those occurrences, but it skipped the 2 semicolons in a row, for example, and it will skip the semicolons inside those ASCII commands that are, you know, these things that we're doing that with. Alright, now suppose I want a semicolon followed by something other than a space. I can say semicolon, bracket, caret, space, close bracket, and now it'll find me any semicolon in my file that's followed by anything other than a space. So it matched this first semicolon because that's followed by a semicolon. It didn't match the second semicolon on that line because it wasn't followed by a character other than a space. It was at the end of the line. But it will find these. So these are escape sequences for turning on colors, and so on and so forth. Alright, so match any of A, B, or C. Well, there's a B and an A and a C and a C and a B and an A, and so on. This should match anything except an A, B, or a C. So that's most of our stuff. It will skip over the B and the A though and jump to the S and the H and the R and so on. Alright, so those are our basic pattern matching specifiers. And what we're really interested in, this is useful sometimes when you're searching for something in a file, but more often we're using this as part of a request to replace part of a file with something else. So in VI, which is where we're going to start working with this, we can say substitute /old/new. Okay, and this will say on the current line, if you find this pattern, replace it with that pattern. So if I say substitute / anything that's not an A, B, or a C, let's just replace that with, I don't know, ha ha ha, right? Well, the first thing it finds on the line that is not an A, B, or a C should be that first number sign. And so that should get replaced with ha ha ha. Okay, we can also say /G at the end, and that makes it what we call a global, which means repeat this replacement everywhere that you possibly can on the current line. So don't just replace the first occurrence of this pattern with this one, replace all occurrences of this pattern with that new pattern. So here if I say substitute anything that's not an ABC with ha ha ha, but do it globally, my line changes into this, right? And so everything on here that wasn't an A or a B or a C got replaced by ha ha. There's my BA from bash and so on and so forth. And I'm doing a lowercase u to undo the last change that I made. Okay, we can also say colon line 1 comma line 2 substitute old and so on, and this will repeat the substitution on all the lines between this line number and that line number inclusive. So if I say 1 comma 5 substitute anything that's not an ABC with, I'll just make it an X, and I'll do that globally on each line. So now the first 5 lines of my file get totally munged and all the non-ABC characters get changed to X. And when you're specifying lines, you can use a $sign to represent the last line. And this is consistent with what $sign is used for elsewhere in Unix. It usually means the end. If you want to get to the end of a line in VI, you can hit a $sign, for example. So $sign as a line number represents the last line of the file. The first line is always line 1, so we don't need a special character for that. But if I say 1 comma $ substitute I'll stick with this. Anything that's not an ABC with an X and do that globally, right? That replaces all those characters in my entire file. And it tells me it made 9,193 substitutions. So it pretty much destroyed my bash RC there. Alright, and these slashes can be pretty much any character. You usually see them written as slashes, but sometimes, you know, you might want to look for a slash in your file and do something with that. So I could use any character I want. So I can say 1 comma $ substitute number sign / number sign / number sign, right? And I'm using these number signs just as a delimiter, and I'm saying substitute a slash with the word slash, right? And let's do that globally. And so, you know, my tilde /.bash rc, that slash should get replaced, these should get replaced, and so on and so forth. So that can be useful. if you want to do something with slashes, which you do often when you're dealing with directories. But we also have another way to do this, which is to use an escape. So backslash is usually an escape. And it means take whatever comes after the backslash literally. Don't interpret it, but just take it literally. So for example, if I want to search for a backslash period, right, this will find me the next occurrence of a period in my file, which is right there, and then there, and then there, and so on. Whereas if I just say slash period, period means any character, so it will match the space and the tilde, and you know, each of those matches that pattern of a period. Yeah, so sometimes brackets will complain if you search for a bracket. And if it does, you can put a backslash in front of the brackets. Or if you want to search for a dollar sign, right, if I just search for dollar sign, it finds the next end of a line, right, which is all of those. If I want to look for the actual character dollar sign, I can say search for backslash dollar sign, and it takes me to, if you don't make typos, it takes me to the next actual dollar sign in my file. And remember, if you hit the bottom of the file, right, if this is the last dollar sign in my file, this is down at line 322, and you try to search and it doesn't find anything from there to the end of the file, it wraps around to the top and it tells you search at bottom, continuing at top. And now I'm back to line 6. All right, so we have ways to look for patterns using a regular expression. We have ways to substitute old patterns with new ones, and that gets us pretty far. But that's not the real power of regular expressions. The real power is that when we're doing a substitution like this, we can record information about what we matched in the old pattern and use that as part of the replacement pattern. Alright, so substitutions and regular expressions. So this gets into an area that, you know, is pretty easy to explain, and once you get good at it, it's pretty easy to write these things. It's really difficult to read these things, though, right? If someone hands you a regular expression and says, what does this do? It can be really hard to figure out, right? But if someone says, write me a regular expression to, you know, butter my toast, it's not too hard to actually do that, okay? But once you've written it, if you blink and you look at it again, it's like, what the heck is this, right? So it's kind of a write once, read never kind of proposition. But regular expressions are fun. Partly because of that. So let's play with the names file. So here's a file of names, and presumably this is last name space first name space middle name, if there is a middle name. And let's say I wanted to change this to take the first name and put that at the end of each line, right? So I want it to be John Henry Smith, Barney Rubble, Betty QED Flintstone, Fred Flintstone, George Awkward Jetson. Okay, so how do I find the first part of each line? Well, I want to start looking at the beginning of the line. So I'm going to put in an anchor to say I want the beginning of the line. And then I want any succession of characters followed by a space. Well, if I search for that, right, it's just going to show me the beginning of each of these lines. But if I try to do something with that, so let's just try to delete the last name from each line of this. So let's just do the following. Let's just say substitute, beginning of the line, any succession of characters followed by a space. Let's just replace that with nothing. And the hope is to get rid of the word Jetson. But if I do this, actually get rid of two of those words. Alright, so what happens? Let's say this is my line. And I search for beginning of the line followed by any succession of characters followed by a space. And I usually draw spaces as this little, whatever you call that mark, truncated U, right? There's an ambiguity here. So the anchor says beginning of the line, well, that's got to be here, okay? And then I have to match 0 or more characters followed by a space. Well, if I match the T, that's not followed by a space. That's not either, that's not either, that's not either. But if I match all of this, that's followed by a space. So this pattern, THIS space, definitely matches this regular expression. But there's something else that matches as well. THIS space, IS space. Because a space is a character, that's going to match my period. So THIS space IS, that matches period asterisk. That's 7 characters followed by a space. So there's 2 ways to interpret this regular expression. One is to match this set of 5 characters. Another is to match this set of 8 characters. So which one gets matched? So here's what you want to remember. Regex is greedy. It will match as much as it possibly can. And we kind of know that already, right? If I were to just match a dot star, well, technically I could return an empty string and say, yeah, that's 0 successions of, you know, a character. Or I could just match the T, because that's, you know, that matches a dot, and that's 1 character. TH is also, you know, a succession of 0 or more characters. Dot star would match the entire line. So regexes are greedy. They always try to match as much as possible. So over here, if I search for beginning of line, dot star space, it's going to pick up all of this. All right, so how am I going to do this? So I can use something fancier in my brackets. I can put in ranges. So I can say bracket A-Z, and that will match any character between A and Z. And I can put in uppercase A-Z, and that will match any character uppercase A through Z. So if I say, let's go back down here to George Jetson, substitute beginning of the line, bracket A through Z, uppercase A through Z, any succession of those followed by a space, and replace that with nothing. Well, this pattern, A through Z, that's only going to match JETSON, and then the space will match this space, and that'll get rid of that first name. All right, we're out of time. Let me take 30 seconds and just show you what we're going to go to. Alright, so all of this stuff, oh, that didn't work. Alright, we'll do this tomorrow. Alright, I will see you next time.